Chattable, you might be asking? It's just an informal chat with some notable industry guests. So it's just as simple as that. Thank you for joining us today. Our guest today is casting associate Brian Sutow. Welcome, Brian.
Hello.
Hello. Good to see your face. Thanks for joining us today.
Likewise. Thanks. Happy to be here.
Good. So my first question these days is usually just, are you here in Los Angeles?
I am. I live on the very outskirts of Los Angeles, as far east as you can go, because my wife is a faculty member at Pomona College, so the very border of LA County.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Just because people are casting from, all over the place these days. So just a curiosity. What does your wife teach?
Theater. It runs in the family. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, then speaking of family, I understand you're a newer papa. Is that correct?
I am. At some point during this Zoom today, most likely either my dog will decide she's running in and out of the room, or my daughter, who's about 14 months old, you'll hear her making noise in the other room. But it's been really great. Actually, the pandemic, that was one of the real gifts of it, as crazy as it was that I got to spend all of this time with her during the early months of her life in a way that never would have been possible, because normally I have a very long commute into Midtown LA every day. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What's the little button's name?
Excuse me. Her name is Jory, which is kind of a unique one. Yeah, her grandfather on my wife's side used to tell stories. He had 3 daughters, and used to tell these nighttime stories to them that were called The Adventures of Julie and Jory, that he would sort of spin these tales about. It was really about his kids, but of these adventures that these little girls would go on. And so we decided we were going to name our girl Jory.
Delightful. I think that's a beautiful name, and congratulations that you did get to spend this time
Thanks. Yeah.
at that age. That is an amazing blessing.
It's been really cool. Yeah. She changes a lot every day, so it's been really, really cool.
How has your life changed being a dad?
Oh my gosh. I mean, this is a little diatribe.
Fast, but how has it changed you? I love watching people become parents. So many of my friends have at this point.
Yeah, it does. It reorganizes your priorities, and it fills you with a love that I did not know I was capable of. I thought, I thought I had a ton of love in my heart, and I did, but your heart just grows all the bigger when you have a little one. And I don't know, this is a bit of a diatribe, but there's a children's book author named, oh gosh, now I'm going to blank on his name. Was it Mo Willems? He's kind of a famous children's book author. He wrote a book called Knuffle Bunny that in another lifetime, when I was an actor, I did a national tour of the show, spent some time with him. And I remember him telling me, as an actor in my 20s, you will be the most successful in your career once you become a parent. There will be an efficiency and a seriousness and an exactitude, and also like you will think about what is actually productive and what will actually sell, and all of these kinds of things once you have a kid. And I was pretty upset with him at the time, or the notion of that at the time. I was like, I'm in my 20s, I'm doing a bunch of stuff, I think I'm doing well. I don't need to have. I didn't think I was ever going to have a kid at that point, so I didn't love that. But of course, he was totally right. The moment I became a dad, there is an efficiency that comes with it, and a drive that goes with it. And I, knock on wood, I hope I'm not plateauing, but this is the most successful I think I've ever been, and I'm just trying to keep that train moving forward.
Absolutely. It's only good things from here on in. I've seen it happen so many times. There's a real grounding influence when people become parents. So
totally.
Awesome. Where'd you grow up, Brian?
So I grew up just outside of Chicago in a suburb called Evanston, which is where Northwestern University is. And it was a great, idyllic place to grow up. I loved it.
Oh, fantastic. So American suburban life.
American suburban life. But, the cool thing about growing up there was not only that Evanston was sort of purposefully meant to be an answer to the general racism of Chicago, and Evanston has plenty of problems, and especially lately, I've really come to realize how problematic certain things are. But I did grow up in a diverse suburb and having, you know, a diversity of friends, and that was always just the norm. And then the other thing that's really nice about Chicago is that it has an incredible theater scene. And so growing up at the time thinking I wanted to be an actor, you know, I got to start participating in that storefront theater scene as a kid. Really in middle school, I started sort of acting professionally and getting to be around these adult actors who took things so seriously and had this great sense of craft. And there was always great theater to go to that my parents were really terrific about taking me to the Goodman Theater and Steppenwolf and all of these other places where I was really seeing some awesome stuff. So I loved it.
That's incredible. How fortunate. Can you
Yeah.
elaborate on acting professionally in middle school, did you say?
Yeah, there was oh gosh, I didn't go too far with it because I was still, you know, a full-time student and doing all of that stuff. But I
What was it?
started.
Commercials? Were you on stage or what was
Oh
happening?
yeah, I was on. Yeah, so there was a theater in the northern suburbs called Apple Tree, that I'm, you know, I'm not positive of this, but I'm pretty sure as a middle schooler I was doing these musical theater reviews with Rachel Brosnahan of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Hard to say because I was one of very few boys in a group with many young girls. We were all middle school aged, and we would tour around and do these medleys of like Disney songs and whatever else. But I'm pretty sure she was there with me. If not, there are plenty of people who were a part of that who've gone on to do like Broadway and stuff. And then when I was in high school, I had the pleasure of doing this. I did a little, there was a company called Light Opera Works that I did some stuff with. My mother was an opera singer, so she helped train my voice. I had an okay voice at the time. But one of my favorite things that I got to do was there's a company. Oh gosh, this shows my brain is so shot. I got to do it's a company called Eclipse Theater Company, which is a really wonderful, reputable company there. But I got to do this John Guare play called Landscape of the Body, which anybody who knows John Guare, even if you don't know that play, that's one of his lesser works, but he wrote 6 Degrees of Separation and a bunch of other really cool stuff. He's got this House with Blue Leaves is another one of his really famous plays. He's got this dark, sort of absurdist comic bent, and it's all kind of morbid and out there. And I got to play this kid who gets decapitated by the end of the play, and so they let me keep the mold of my head that they made for the moment that my decapitated head would roll out from the shopping cart, which I kept with me for years and years and years. I loved it, but it was a director who was one of the main people at the Goodman, and one of the people who really ran the Goodman, and I just loved working with him and learning from him. And then went on when I was in college. This is jumping forward a little bit, but my first entree to casting was my freshman year of college. I went and assisted the casting department at the Goodman Theater and completely fell in love with that process. So there you go.
Is all very exciting. So, and you have a BFA in drama, right?
I do, yeah. So I went to the North Carolina School of the Arts and got a BFA in drama, and then spent the early part of my 20s running a theater company, working as an equity actor, being a playwright, doing a bunch of stuff. But it was a really cool conservatory to be at, and I learned a lot, and I'm still a very loyal alum. So
You are a hyphenate, is what we often call ourselves in the industry.
yes, I have worn way too many hats, most of them hats that pay little to no money, but it has been a wonderful life. I'll take it.
I relate, Brian. It's why I opened an acting school.
Totally, sure.
But directing, yes, I love it. Improvising, yes, I love it. Teaching,
Sure.
I genuinely love it. I spent a little time casting myself. Not,
Oh, wow.
I often tell the story that I came back out of it because I was thinking, I love this. And I might go ahead and stay, and I was good at it. Except for the fact that since I'm from here, I'm a native Californian guy. So I
Mm.
grew up in Hollywood, and I knew everybody who was coming in that I was bringing in for auditions. And I was just painfully slow because anybody who was having difficulty with just the audition process, the technical aspects, working on camera versus stage, etc., I just wanted to stop and help everybody. So,
Yeah.
because this is my passion, it's my jam. So anyway, that's my brief bio back. But yeah, so I have a little insight into what it is to work on the other side of the camera, and it informs my teaching quite a lot.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I love that.
So let's see. I think that covered that because we got into how you got into. Oh, so let's talk about one of your most recent projects and anything else that you care to or can, because I know we live in a time of non-disclosure, but we can talk about Atypical, can we?
We can, yeah. So I just wrapped, it's a couple weeks ago now, but that we wrapped production on the fourth and final season of Atypical, which was a lovely experience, and I'm really excited for people to see it in the fall. And I had started working on Atypical. Yeah, thanks for the congrats in the chat. I had started working on it towards the end of the third season, so I was with the show for a little while. Um, what to share, and yes, as you said, I think I said this when I filled out my form before coming to join you today. I'm working on a couple of film projects right now, including a big feature for Disney, but I don't know what I'm allowed to say beyond that. So and that's its whole own thing.
I
It's
don't even think you can say the word Disney publicly. I think
okay, there you go. I'm already in trouble. They're gonna find
that's
me, hunt me down. The mouse is out to get me. Yeah. So, Atypical is, I don't know what to say about it specifically. It's a really lovely company. It's, I love the show and the tone that it finds, which is this lovely one camera balance of uh, comedy and drama and really earnest, and obviously the exploration of what it is to be neurodiverse for the lead character, and also much of the ensemble, that we really did have several neurodiverse performers who were part of the ensemble, several of whom are really hysterically funny and have a wonderful sense of comedy. But not necessarily the most challenge. It's a wonderful environment to be a part of. Not the most challenging show, because they tend to be pretty selective about how much they add characters to the storyline. So as opposed to, I worked on, not this season, but the previous season of This Is Us, we got the pilot episode and there were like 40 roles to cast, and albeit there was a little bit of lead time, but most of the time on Atypical, in terms of new roles and finding people, it was mostly like one or two per episode, and we had a big lead on, here are a couple of major recurring guest stars that we want to spend some time finding for this season. So it's a little bit more of an intimate process on that show.
gotcha. Um, you used an interesting term. I get what it means from context and knowing the show, but you said neurodiverse.
Yeah, neurodiverse is, I think, the proper parlance now, if we're talking about anybody who, I think it encompasses more than this, but people who are on the autism spectrum. So Atypical, for anybody who hasn't seen it, is about a family, and really the protagonist is this young man who is on the autism spectrum, and is also very artistic. He's an incredible visual artist, and has this incredible passion the entire time for, he's very obsessed with penguins and Antarctica, and is constantly drawing, and will be stimming, which is sort of this sensory behavior to calm himself because he's on the spectrum. And yeah, it was one of the things I love about the company that I work for, is that we really do believe in and champion diversity and representation. And many people might be familiar, there's a wonderful company here in town, KMR, one of the agencies, which specifically has a diversity department. And there's just this wonderful pool of talent of neurodiverse actors. I think I've auditioned probably just about all of them, because I also cast this tiny film for Netflix called All Together Now, that also happened to very prominently feature a neurodiverse character, and we wanted to hire a neurodiverse actor, and they had to be really funny and good with puns. And so, but it's really wonderful that that's a pool of talent that's being championed and really developing out here.
Awesome. Well, that's good to know, and I'm glad I followed up on that and circled back. Um, what I have so many questions. I'm trying to order them all. Well, let's talk about this. So obviously, a year in pandemic has changed. I think auditioning was already moving towards self-taping and a digital experience for
Yeah.
actors. It
Mhm.
wasn't news, but the pandemic obviously escalated it. So, I mean, just what are any thoughts you have on this current moment, and if we're going back to the way it was before, do you think it's staying? What do you think?
Yeah. if any of you have been in a class with me, I might be repeating some of my spiel, but here's how I generally feel about it is I don't love self-tapes. Here's the positive of self-tapes for me is that we get to see a slightly larger pool of talent. That if, especially on a TV show where the clock is always ticking and we really have a limited amount of time to find the co-stars and guest stars that we need for any given episode, when we're doing that in person, I will see, say, maybe 20 or 30 people in a session, and that's kind of going to be it. Versus if we're getting self-tapes, we can open it up to some more because it just doesn't take as long to review as it does to usher people in and out of the room, take the time with them, so on and so forth. So that's great because we're meeting more people, seeing more faces, getting to know more people, which is a huge and important part of our job. And I look forward to that continuing. What I don't love about it is that so often actors are given so little information, and sometimes we get self-tapes back and it's like, great, we've got a great bunch of options here, and sometimes you get them back and you go, you know what, this is a great group of actors, I think any of them could play this part, but they would have all knocked it out of the ballpark if I could have been in the room with them, given them an adjustment. As is, it's all kind of wrong, and that's not their fault. That's because we were only allowed to give them this small bit of information, and there's just no way to adjust. So I think that here's where I think things will land. We will go back to in-person auditions to some degree. I think self-tapes will become even more of a tool, as they have been during the pandemic, than they were previously. Previously, my office specifically, we would really only do self-tapes when it was a tiny co-star. I think we're going to have to stretch that a little bit, and it will become more significant. The thing that's definitely not going away is Zoom auditions. And the reason that's not going away is because producers and directors and showrunners have discovered just how efficient it is. That rather than having to drive across town and lose half their day to come and see some actors for a role, now they can go, you know what, I've got a half hour or an hour in my schedule, so we can see 2 people or 6 people or whatever it is, and I can just pop in and out and then go on with my day. And so that's complicated because it puts a lot of onus on the actor. And I really would encourage anybody who's acting today to learn how to be very good in that format. It's challenging, but it does work. That's the thing. I am finding, even the feature that I'm, one of the features that I'm casting right now, we have been doing lots of Zoom sessions with the director with people from all around the world, and it works. And but it can be hard. I cast, it was just announced a couple days ago. There was a pilot that I cast for Fox called The Big Leap that has now been picked up, sort of an hour-long comedy, dramedy type thing. And when we were doing chemistry reads with people for significant roles, and in order to sort of make the studio understand how these characters played together, they were having the actors pretend to play together like this, that they were having to pretend that they were having this banter like this, which is really a hard way to make chemistry, I think. So there are some really big actor challenges there. And the big piece of advice that I give to people is don't just let it become acting to a webcam. Make sure you're still placing yourself in the location. Make sure that you are still, really digging into the givens and the variables that you would dig into in the room or if you were in person. And make sure you have good lighting and a good backdrop, because any distraction unfortunately just detracts, but it's very much here to stay.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much what we work on at Actors Comedy Studio. We're already, the whole idea of the school was to be a counterpoint to improv and sketch, which is where I started and I love, but I just noticed that it wasn't including all the other aspects of audition training and on-camera training and other elements of the business that weren't being picked up. So in short, that's what our school endeavors to do. But yeah, absolutely, more than ever, I think actors have to lean into the technical and imaginative aspects of auditioning for all the reasons that you just said.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
Really hard to help people be able to do that, because it does work. You're right, it does work, and everybody's just got to sort out their feelings about it. I mean, even after a year, I still hear some people saying, I hate it, it doesn't work for me. As things balance out, of course some things are going to happen in person again, but I don't think we're going to leave this environment completely behind either, like you said.
And there are some bonuses too. I mean, maybe not so much with the Zoom in terms of what I'm about to say, but when you're self-taping, you have a lot more control of what the final product is that is sent off to the team. You know, you can make sure, one of the hardest thing, so I was a terrible auditioner back when I was an actor, and part of the reason why was that I had a lot of nerves and I was never able to really find that confidence and grounding that you want in the audition experience. And I do think that there's unfortunately this thing that happens where people who are there are some actors who are really good at auditioning, really good at being confident and calm at the top of an audition and dropping in, and might be actually more limited in terms of their craft, versus there are some really talented actors who just are not the best auditioners, and it makes it much harder to book the job. But when you're self-taping, you can make sure that you feel really good about what you're sending off to the team and that it's representative of your work and that you are grounded and dropped in from the top of your takes.
Do you, when you send out submissions, do you, to that point, ask for multiple takes to be sent, just since you can't adjust live?
Usually so, yeah. So for the entire the entire season of Atypical, this last season when everything was a self-tape, we would always ask people to do 2 takes of each scene they were sending in. And sometimes that was confusing to people because what does that mean, right? To do 2 takes. And it's really, you don't want to do the exact same thing twice, but you also don't want to be doing something that is so radically different. You want to make sure that it makes sense. So it's often about what is a small, smart variable to play with that gives a different option, or is there a slightly different read, a slightly different take to have on something, but you don't want to go crazy with it. You just want to show some flexibility while still doing something that makes sense for the scene in both goes.
Right, you can't upend the moment, even if it's a couple of lines and just right.
Totally.
So to me, that would go, you know, what we would practice is, well, why don't you change the intention? So it's still something within context, but it's a different shading.
Yeah, and you know, I'm so missing being in the room with actors, but that was something that I would always do when I can. You just said when you were in casting, part of the issue was that you took too much time. I am known for taking too much time as well, and my classes also, whenever I teach, tend to run over because I love to always do something twice. And whenever I bring an actor into the room, back when we were auditioning in person, that was the first thing I would always say, unless I was massively behind, was just so you know, we're going to do this at least twice, because it creates space, it creates a different energy, it creates an openness that this is just play, we're just working, it's collaborative, versus, you know, you got these yesterday and you've crammed them into your head, and then you're going to be walked into the room and very quickly have to go through the 3 scenes in the slate, and then you're out the door. It's very inhumane and it doesn't create good work, and I don't understand it, because our success depends on your success. But you know, to me, the audition process is largely, you brought up improv as well, but a big piece of it is that flexibility to taking an adjustment. And so I guess in self-tapes, saying, can you do 2 takes of something, is sort of the stand-in for that. Can I see that you're not just going to deliver the exact same thing over and over again, but that you can adjust some variables and still deliver something that is really successful and makes sense?
Yeah, for sure. One of the questions I get asked a lot, you know, I teach people at all levels, right? So we teach people who are just getting started on their acting journey, and people who are well into their careers. I help them with audition coachings and help get them, you know, sent to the studio network. People who are just starting, or maybe a little bit into booking their first few things, ask this question a lot. So I would love to know your thoughts. Um, Staying out of the union as long as possible, or asked another way, given that network series and shows are union projects, they're inherently union projects, does an actor have a better chance, worse chance, equal odds of booking if they're a non-union actor auditioning for a union show?
So my answer might be specific to my experience. And I don't necessarily get the sense that my answer is universal, but uh, there's a lot to be said for logging flying miles in front of the camera, so to speak, and really building up that muscle and that tool. And my understanding is there is a good deal of non-union work that happens in LA, and that can be both lucrative and also a great way to build your craft. Most of this, almost every show I've worked on, or no, every show I have worked on, I can't see you if you're non-union. And that's not set by me. That is set by the studios, that they are, with very rare exceptions, not willing to Taft-Hartley someone for a co-star. And we can talk about what that is if people are unfamiliar with that term. But so if you're SAG eligible, totally fine. You are, at that point, you are game. You can still continue to do non-union work, but you are eligible to be brought in and audition for union work. It's just going to be on you to pay the union dues the next time that you book something that is a part of SAG. But, you know, it costs the studios, and it's silly because we're talking about shows that cost millions of dollars, but it costs them like an additional $500 every time they bring in someone who is non-union, Taft-Hartley them to become SAG eligible. And a lot of the studios, it is just their policy. They are not willing to do that except in very special circumstances, such as, you know, on This Is Us, when we were casting blind children who needed to ride a bike or whatever, you know, quite literally, it was something that we cast, but the rest of the time you had to be SAG. So from my experience, my recommendation, if you feel that you are working at a professional level and you are ready, I don't see the downside of becoming SAG eligible if you can.
Fantastic. You know, it's what I can reflect is that at least from my point of view, it's not a universal answer. It's why I ask all of my friends in casting. It does vary. I would say the greater percentage has been your answer, and it might be going more and more that way. I think just because of everything that's happening, but like nobody can, it's not just the $500. It is, and it's got a P word attached to it, which is penalty. It's technically, yes, the Taft-Hartley, but they consider it a penalty. So yeah, the verbiage inherently implies a certain bias, like we don't want to deal with that. But everything is, it just happens so quickly, particularly in TV casting. There's just not time for paperwork or a question mark. So I've, from my perspective, because I ask that question a lot, just so I'm able to relate the most current information, but my advice is what your advice generally is. And I think you said it so well. When you feel that you're ready to work at a professional level. And I just think it's also gotten confusing because so many commercials are, which is a different category, obviously, but there's so many are non-union that actors are put in this bind where their commercial agents are saying, stay out as long as humanly possible. To get the non-union goodies. I have no judgment either way. I see people getting confused and I just want to help them.
Totally. And it also depends on the market. My understanding is that for whatever reason in New York, there is more opportunity for people to be Taft-Hartley'd, that there maybe the thinking from the studios is that this is more of a theater town. And so people might be a part of equity, but they're not necessarily going to be a part of SAG as inherently as in LA. I can say for myself, I became SAG eligible after I quit acting because I was living in the Midwest. My wife had a job as a professor and was randomly courted to do a union commercial, and so they, you know, Taft-Hartley'd me, and I'm like, sure, I'll take the money, even though I wasn't interested in acting anymore. But so smaller markets, you know, Washington D.C., where I started my career as an actor, the expectation is not going to be there are a ton of SAG actors out here, even if there are a ton of equity actors there. And so productions build that expectation into their budget in terms of local casting in a way that's very different from if you're in LA. It seems like the expectation is TV and film people are going to be SAG. There's a large enough pool of people who are that they don't want to deal with that penalty, as you said.
Such a terrific answer. I'm so glad you're here, Brian.
I'm glad to be here.
You're a smart fella. And I can tell how much you care about the overall situation in actors just by the way you're answering the questions, because I can see you've thought about these things a lot. Every once in a while, I'll talk to somebody in casting and they're like, I haven't really thought about it. I don't know. Depends on what show I'm on. Next.
Wild. Yeah. Yeah. No, I love actors. That's the whole reason I'm doing this. I really love actors and being in the room with them as they're working. So yeah.
I need to. Here's another question. Aside from just general training and talent, what would you describe or define as an overall quality audition?
Yeah, well, so it's a couple of things. It's coming in very prepared with your performance of the role. I know that this is a bit of a trope, but I think it's true that if you come in trying to deliver the version of the role that you think we want to see, as opposed to the version of the role that is your opportunity to act that part and own that performance, you're just on a much better footing. It's a much stronger performance if it's you having command over it. Excuse me. That does not mean, however, that you shouldn't really sleuth the sides and the information that you've gotten very carefully so that that performance is specific and grounded in the text. You know, those two things go together. So that's part one. I like to say honest but interesting, right? It has to truthful but interesting. Part two, and this is where you're bringing up improv, I think is such a useful skill for anybody, regardless of whether they want to be an improver professionally or whatever else. But for auditions specifically, the second part of it is that ability to take an adjustment in the room, take an adjustment on the fly, and really incorporate it in a smart and successful way pretty instantaneously. And that is kind of a whole different craft and process than what you might experience being an actor rehearsing theater, or even being an actor preparing to go to set, where you might have more time to know exactly what you're trying to nail down depending on the circumstance. But that is really the audition skill. It's those two things: coming in super prepared with your performance, and then when you get a note, whether that note makes sense or not, and it may not. Sometimes we're just wanting to see an adjustment, and some casting people are more talented than others, you know, but to really take that and do something with it that makes sense.
Yeah, that the adjustment countdown clock is short, and that is a precarious moment in an actor's life, right? There's, like you said,
Yeah.
it was said to you, and it's really like you're in plain sight, and I'm just gonna keep looking at you while you work out what I said right in front of me, and then make an adjustment and go again. It can,
Yeah, and it's wild. You know, I've had the very fortunate opportunity to be in the room with some very successful, very talented actors who are further along in their career, and sometimes these directors on films and stuff give this feedback that is very technical or whatever, and the expectation is that you just turn around and do it instantaneously, that you go into scene two, and people do it. They've developed that muscle. They know they take that technical note, and or those 5 technical notes that they've gotten all at once, and then they go right back into the 3-minute scene and they nail all of them. So it's not easy, but that is the muscle to build.
it is a muscle, and it can be trained and practiced.
Yeah.
So I agree. I love that you said that. And then in regard to the first part of your answer, I also appreciate that so much, because what I try to help actors with is, well, is empowerment as much as training to the craft, because it's so different than, you know, there's even a, I mean, theater can still be competitive, but it's at least a bit more collaborative, and you're not just this solo person in your house throwing throwing something
Yeah.
on a tape. uh, but I think if you don't get a mindset of making an offer that, and not worrying about what other people want, or trying to please a person that you might not even be seeing at this point, because I think that creates an actor resentment feedback loop. Like, I didn't get anything, and who knows what they want. Because I think you can't think that way. You never could before, but I think particularly now, because it's not just a literal adjustment actors are not getting. It's when you're building and doing a lot of self taping, you don't even get a visual cue or a good job. I mean, literally just seeing a human being's reaction to your work can still be information. And now actors self-taping are not getting any.
Yeah, I mean, here's the two things that I really like to say to actors that it's part of the head game that I was never able to get good at myself. Is one, and I know that this can be really hard to take in. It's never about the individual audition. It's about building a relationship with a casting office. That doesn't mean you don't give your all to every single audition. It just means that you know, a real metric of success is that place calling me back. Um, uh, and are you consistently doing good work there? But the other way that I really like to think about it, and it is sort of a thought experiment. I'll say what I normally say, but it's something I keep chewing on, is especially in TV, especially when we're talking co-stars, guest stars, a little bit different if we're talking major recurring guest stars or if we're talking series regulars. But again, that clock is always really ticking. And what that means is our success as a casting person is 100% tied to your success if you are being brought into the room or if you're being asked to self-tape. It is a great day for me. I'm just going to talk as if we're still meeting in person for auditions. It's a great day for me if I'm seeing 30 actors for a role and all 30 of them are spectacular. Then I can go back to the casting director above me and say, we've got a great group. I met a bunch of great new faces, whatever it is, or saw a lot of our favorites. We're in great shape. We're going to have amazing selects to send to the team. Everybody's happy. If I have a day where I go into a room of 30 actors and leave going, I just don't know. I don't know that we really found it there. Then we're all in trouble because again, that schedule is set. This multi-million-dollar machine is in motion. An actor needs to be on set at the same time still, but we might need to hold another session. Or if we send a crummy group to the team, they're not pleased with our work. They have nobody that they want to choose. So I can't tell you how much I want every actor to succeed when they are in the room with me. Not to mention that it is just much more fun. It's much more fun to watch people succeed and to be in the room with good collaborative actors who are having a good time and doing the work than it is to watch someone struggle. And if there was ever a time that my office, we're always buried in work, we're very busy, but if there was ever a time that we would pause for a few minutes to enjoy something, we would pause to watch back somebody's audition who just really nailed it, who did amazing work. We really celebrate and champion great work. The only time I have celebrated and championed a bad audition was when it was somebody who was very famous, who was also a very successful improver, who totally knew he was blowing it, and he just started playing around and having a great time, and he knew it too. So, but short of that, if you can sort of, this is the part I'm still chewing on, but it is sort of a thought experiment. It's not just, can I calm my nerves? It's, can I shift the way I'm thinking about this in my head to understand that this whole thing is a very collaborative experiment, and whether or not it so often doesn't come down to who is the quote unquote best actor, which would be subjective anyways. It's about assembling pieces of the puzzle. So there are so many variables that are and are not personal to you, but can you come in and understand it as a collaborative experience where you are an empowered actor who is in charge of your craft and in charge of your instrument, and you're here to work and play, and so are the other people sitting on the other side of the table. We're all just trying to create something together. And if you demystify it that way, I think you can become much more successful and have a much better time.
Fantastic. I couldn't agree more. When people, actors or any players in this whole big industry, embrace that it is the time we spend is best spent, sure, training, studying, up-leveling your skills, but it's building relationships of trust, and everybody has to do it. Casting has to do it. The crew on the set has to do it to get their next jobs. And it's not getting to know people in a shallow sense, like, I know somebody, so I'm in. It's building a broad network of people who become fans of your work and trust your ability, and also professionalism as you're moving through auditions and offices.
Yeah, I've told this story before, and it happened to a lesser degree on Atypical this last season, but so not this season, but the previous season of This Is Us, when I was working on it, there was an actor we must have called in at least 7 or 8 times, so for 7 or 8 different episodes for a role. Which means he was being very successful. He was always in the selects. He was always sent off to the team. He never booked a job that season, but he sure as hell has booked work from our office and will continue to. And I hope he knows that that is an actor really doing the work and succeeding. He always brings in a good audition. So we're always going to call him back when the opportunity makes sense. And that will, even though it didn't instantaneously yield work on that show that season, in the long run, that's how you build a career. So there you go.
Absolutely. Without naming names, of course, do you have any actor or audition horror stories?
Trying trying to think. Nothing too horrendous. I did love, and I won't name the name, but he is a famous comedian who I am such a fan of. Who that was a different Disney film that I was just filling in that day. But this actor who came in and was kind of totally unprepared and just, but he wouldn't let us go. He just improvised for like 20 minutes. It was remarkable but absurd. uh the only thing that really bothers me, and I don't even remember the names to be totally honest, but every once in a while you get an actor who is either so hard on themselves that it takes the air out of what I might have thought is a good performance. That's happened on multiple occasions where I give somebody an adjustment and they do what I think is really good work, and then as soon as the take is over, there you just see them being like, sorry, it was awful, I screwed it up. That's no fun to see someone be so ungenerous with themselves. And also it's in a, not that this would change my opinion, but it sort of hurts to go like, well, I thought it was good work, does that make me a dummy then to think you just did a really good job? But really the big no, and it's only happened a couple times to me, but is where someone is so incredibly rude that you just kind of go, there's no way I could send that person to a set. It doesn't matter how talented they are. The team will be furious with me if I'm the one who, as a gatekeeper, so to speak, pass this through to them, because this person is obnoxious. And I have a couple of times had the experience where, even though I would normally do, that second take or whatever, have just had to go, thank you so much, and call it a day because the writing's on the wall. So be a nice person. We try our best to be nice people too, and that's about it in terms of horror stories.
Fair. I'm glad that you don't have more. And by the way, those same guys who are jerks in the room, they're also jerks in the waiting room. I have memories of that.
Totally.
Right? They're shocky to everyone else, and then they're rude to casting. It's like, well, how do you think you're moving forward, buddy?
Yeah, and the thing is, we do get called, every once in a while someone slips through that we don't, is very talented and we don't notice, and then the shows are calling us and going, why did you send, excuse my language, but such an asshole to set? Like, how could you do that to us? Now we're stuck in this nightmare. And so we really try not to do that. We really, it's such a team sport. Anything on camera requires so many people that everybody has to be professional and well behaved.
It is so weird, because at the end of the day, the collection of people does need to work as a team. But unlike theater, you don't really practice together and spend time together in the run-up necessarily.
Right.
Everybody's rather isolated, especially in TV with all the moving parts, and especially if you're guesting or co-starring. Then you just like jumping on a moving freight train, I think.
But even if you're a movie star, so Mary Louise Parker is also an alum of the school I went to, and I remember her coming back at one point. She's such a character, but telling a story, I'm trying to remember what the movie was. It was something with Brad Pitt, and she said her first day on set, her very first scene, they were like, great, get naked and let us cover you in blood. And that's, with a crew of like 100 people around you. So, and that's as she was already a very famous actor at that point. There is a certain... there are so many considerations that go into how something is made on camera, and efficiency is such a big part of it that often the actor experience is really not the thing that's forefronted, and everybody has to be willing to just sort of jump in and go with whatever piece of the story it is.
Yeah, for sure. In your experience, is there a notable distinction between casting television and films?
Well, the big distinction would be, and it's a little bit different. There's my daughter, if you just heard a scream. Hey. The big distinction would be the space that is given to the search. So, but that's a little bit true for series regulars as well, that oftentimes, that thing I said earlier about co-stars and guest stars, where if it's not a major recurring guest star and you're getting a bunch of advance notice, you are probably seeing a smaller pool of talent because the clock is really ticking. The film project that I can't name right now, I just spent, I think, 5 weeks just working on one role. And so that amount of space given to a single piece of the puzzle, it's just very different. And so of course you are digging deeper or further or being much more specific, but the same ends up being true for casting series regulars on a TV show, is that you spend an awful lot of time really figuring out how all of those puzzle pieces are going to fit together, because there's not only a lot of money on the line, but it's not just finding that individual genius actor, but it's finding those pieces that really mesh together and make sense, that's going to lead to the long-term success of that project. So it just becomes a much more extensive thing. The other part, which is not interesting to actors at all, is just when you're working with bigger companies on a bigger film, the expectation of what I need to deliver and how I need to comport myself is it's a little bit fancier. The expectations are a little bit higher. So, but to be expected, right?
Is it a bit more corporate? Is that a word you would use, or?
It is. Some of these, you get a very specific manual of expectations of everything that you need to deliver for every step of the process, and it is, yeah, corporate is a good word for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair dues. One of the things that I get asked pretty often about is working in multiple markets and casting in different markets, being a local hire. Do you have any thoughts on that as it applies to the current moment?
Well, as it applies to the current moment, I think it doesn't apply to the current moment. I think that it was still already hard in television to justify, if a show shoots in LA, casting someone out of New York who says they can be LA local, because it's just such a gamble. You're gambling that, and that's, for one thing, it's kind of weird if it's happening behind scenes, that it's the actor volunteering themselves that they're going to travel themselves out and house themselves, as opposed to everything being above board with SAG, and that somebody is being traveled by production and housed by production, which is a major cost. And so shows don't tend to do it. But in TV and in film, things can change so last second that it's always a risky gamble. During COVID, as a policy, my company has just not been doing it at all. You just you can't fly somebody out from New York, even though they can be an LA local, to be on a thing that is scheduled for next Tuesday, because you just can't trust it. You can't trust that the flight's going to work. You can't trust that they're going to be safe. You don't, every show has its own different testing regimen. That said, when we're out of COVID, and we're getting there, right? Things are already changing. I think it just depends. I personally have not seen a ton of success for the we can be New York, LA local thing. I think certain other things might give you a step up. I was talking to an actor the other day who is LA based, but is able to be Puerto Rico local. I was like, that's definitely worth putting down there, because that's specific. And Puerto Rico is a place with really great film incentives right now. So there's going to be work, and that might give you the leg up. So it depends on the market. It depends how earnestly that opportunity exists for you. There's nothing wrong with it being down on your resume or something that your reps know about, but just know that most of the time it's not as big of a boon or a help as you might think.
Got it. I'm really glad I asked that, because we think about other markets. Usually the go-tos are like Atlanta, maybe New Mexico, Vancouver. No one's ever said Puerto Rico before.
Puerto Rico's a new one, and so a thing I haven't brought up, and it doesn't matter at all, is I moved out here thinking I was going to be a writer, and have very slowly had a film that's been coming together for a number of years. But so looking at the territories, and so it just so happens that Puerto Rico, especially after the devastation that happened a couple of years ago, they have incredible film incentives, and I think we're going to see a lot of film work moving there, because all the production companies chase the tax rebates, and when the tax rebates are through the roof, why not? Why wouldn't you go there? That's sort of like free money back in your pocket. So, but yeah, places like New Mexico historically, and of course Atlanta has become such a film hub. If you're based in New York or LA and can be Atlanta local, sure, put it on your resume. Why not? Same thing with Chicago, which is seeing an uptick despite not having the best incentives. But yeah, totally. Why not? It's a small edge, but it's not a huge thing.
Well, and plus, we've thrown Puerto Rico some paper towels, so
exactly. So solved.
Sorry, everybody. The audience is going to turn. I have one more question for you. We should go to them, because I bet they have a bunch of questions for you. My last question, because it's recent and somewhat topical, and maybe edgy. There was a lot of talk. I don't know why I heard it so much this year in particular, but we just had the Oscars and there's a lot of opinions about casting being represented at the Academy Awards. Do you have any thoughts?
Oh, I thought there was so much else to say about the Oscars this year.
Do you want to just trash the Oscars for 5 minutes?
I could. I shouldn't, since you're recording, but I could. I also worked the Oscars when I first moved out to LA. That was one of my first jobs, and what
As an escort.
yeah, exactly. No, I because I had run a theater company previously, I ended up being a floor manager at the Dolby Theater and was there the year that Moonlight won, which was its own crazy experience of the whole La La Land Moonlight debacle. But the Oscars are interesting. I mean, they're really interesting. The big thing I would say is when they're in person, by the time you get to the end of the night, everybody is out in the lobby drinking. It's a bunch of seat fillers there to hear Best Picture. Anyways, I would love to see, casting, we often get short shrift, that we are one of the major departments and one of the critical departments that tends to not only not be mentioned in or considered in award shows, but even in announcements. Deadline or Broadway World or whatever it is, or Variety might, the cast has been set for such and such a project, and they will list
network,
everybody but the casting team. My office just cast the Netflix musical 13, which was discovering a bunch of teenage kids who could sing and play instruments and do all this stuff, and the articles come out and they mention everybody but casting, and like that is a really casting intensive process when it's about discovering a bunch of youngsters who are incredibly talented. Like, that is so much work. So that said, I remain not terribly hopeful that it will ever happen, because we are so much in the business of helping to enable somebody else's vision, and I just don't expect other people to really understand how to reward that or honor that. I mean, we have our own awards show. We have the RDOs, which are delightful, from the Casting Society of America, but it does seem like something that maybe we'll get there someday. No day too soon, I don't suspect.
Okay, interesting. I heard about it a lot. I mean, I'm from here and etc. So I've heard it before, but just this year it seemed to percolate a lot, and I didn't know what triggered it. So
Great. From your mouth to the Academy's ears. Sure.
oh, maybe look, they've been forced into some other changes, but they've already publicly said they will not be doing what they did this year again. They're already on record.
Great. The other one that I think is not that it has anything to do with me personally, but wildly underrepresented is fight choreographers. It's such a major part of cinema and of these big spectacles, and those people are so talented, and they get nothing. They get no consideration whatsoever. So,
well, you just gave them some.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm going to segue into, let me shuffle my papers and find the right one, because we're going to go into the speed round, the lightning round Q&A. So I've got 7 questions for you. I'm going to ask fast, say the first thing that comes to your brain. None of this should be too dangerous. Are you ready?
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. What does comedy mean to you?
Truth and surprise.
Oh, that's such a good answer. If you could change one thing about the industry and the way it works, what would it be?
I would make it kinder.
Do you think of yourself as successful?
For the first time in my life recently, yes.
What's a funny word?
Sarcophagus.
It is. What's more important, self-expression or true respect from your known peers?
Ooh, that's really hard. I think self-expression, maybe.
Awesome. Is there anyone not invited to your funeral?
Nope.
Then I'll be there. Is there anything every human being on the planet, in your opinion, has a responsibility to do?
Be decent.
You'd think it'd be easier, huh?
Yeah, had somebody, not to toot my own horn, but somebody yesterday was thanking me for being a nice person, and I was just like, I don't get what's so hard about that. Why can't we all be nice? So there you go.
All right, are you okay? Because we're done with that. So
I feel good. That was less stressful than I thought it would be.
Okay, so just because if you needed aftercare, I'm available.
All right, I appreciate that.
But if we're good, then let's answer questions. I'm going to go, and there might have been some chat going on. I'm not following that so much, everybody. If you're with us, as the question and answer box is what I have up. So this is a good question from Lon Land. How do CDs see FICOR actors? So how did that land with you?
Yeah, you know, I don't, forgive me, I don't have a good answer. I'm not totally familiar with the ins and outs of the FICOR situation. I don't quite know how that works, but I'm familiar with non-union, SAG eligible, and SAG. So somebody else with expertise might have to jump in and answer that.
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in a little bit. I think casting probably, and Erin, our producer, is around, and she's always a good brain to collaborate with. So Erin, if you know something I don't, but I think that might not be something CD casting is even aware of, because if you're FICOR, you're able to work non-union, you are still in the union, but you are forsaking some rights and privileges like voting, etc.
Yeah. I mean, so long as you technically count as being a member of SAG, I don't think it makes a difference to us.
It doesn't make a difference, so I don't think they necessarily know. All right, are there any other questions, kiddios? I mean, I have more questions I didn't ask Brian. Oh, here we go. Gail Silver from Chicago, Evanston. It's your peeps, Brian. They're showing up. Graduate of theater, DePaul Theater School. I put my message question in the chat box. Please look. Thanks. Okay, well, Gail, wow, Gail's like my marching orders. I think I said drop it in the other box, but okay. Yeah, it's much harder to find in the chat because people chat in the chat.
So unclear whether she may have seen young high school me in Landscape of the Body, or it could have been a different production. Very cool that you got to work with William H. Macy at the top of his career, and the whole Mamet thing. I'll reserve my thoughts on Mamet.
Don't! That's what we needed, some kind of overshare, Brian. You got to spill some tea. Come on.
I'm being recorded. He does not seem terribly kind. Let's put it that way. Even to his own daughter. I have some friends who were in a show off Broadway with him, and he was not the kindest. I'll keep it at that. Am I too young to remember that theater? I don't know which theater. The way to keep in touch with me, it's my first name, last name, and the word casting @gmail.com.
Fantastic. Let's see. Thanks, Amanda. Amanda also says, do you still read plays? If so, what was the last one that you read that you loved? Anything on your radar or you can recommend?
Oh, I do still read plays, but not as often as I used to.
These are always a good excuse to say I can't get to that because I had a baby.
Yeah, I read a lot of screenplays, both because I'm interested in the form as a writer, and also because it comes with the territory of my job. But I was just watching some actors do some work from Josh Harmon recently, and was like, I need to read Significant Others, which happens to be sitting on my shelf. So that's the next one I will be reading.
Okay, good. I'm laughing not at you as much as the next question. So Kirk, I love you. Brian might not be aware of my verbiage. One of the things that we talk about at Actors Comedy Studio are comedy archetypes, and this truly is not a setup. But it's I just released this book, The Comedy Code, this year.
Congrats.
Thank you. A big section of it is the heroes of comedy. So, talking about the archetypal psyches that writers have employed in sitcoms throughout the years. So Kirk says not to overtly pimp that book on the desk, which I'm doing by having it in the frame. I'm not, I'm shameless. Which is your favorite archetype to cast? And they list them the way I list them. I don't necessarily know that Brian would have that same categorization in his head. So you're on the hook, you're off the hook, and can answer that any way that you like.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a sense of what these types mean just based on reading this list really quickly. The truth,
is you have to track things in the breakdowns anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that any of these present opportunities for characters with a really strong point of view and a strong and unique truth, which is what makes it fun to me in terms of craft and acting. So personally, and based on my own writing and my own interests, probably the neurotic is just, I really live in that world. I'm a neurotic, slightly obsessive compulsive Jew myself, so like it's just all very familiar. But I love all of them. Who doesn't love a good buffoon,
Is Fraser the holy grail of sitcoms to you, or something else? Or
Oh, I have a friend who just watches all of Frasier kind of on repeat. It's his life's whatever. I do love Frasier. I'm trying to think, the original Arrested Development was huge for me. I also, I also love Curb Your Enthusiasm and that sort of umbragey. I don't know which one of these that might fall into, but the umbragey Jew with
well, Larry ultimately is the buffoon in that show because he's the catalyst for his own constant demise. He upends himself. So
sure.
Really everybody else on the show exists just to call him out and point that out, largely.
Yeah. The other thing I would say, and this is not one of the types, but I probably have a higher threshold personally in love of sort of cringe comedy, the the British Office, that kind of deeply painful. Or there's this wonderful European film called Tony Erdmann that came out a couple of years ago, where what's the other one that's so good? The guy who did The Square, the skiing movie. Force Majeure, where it's just so deeply uncomfortable, the situation the characters are in. I just love that. I just eat that up. I know other people can't go there, but to me, that is just the best.
I like to watch people squirm. That makes me think of one of my favorite comedies, which is The Ref. Do you know that movie?
I do know that movie. Yeah, totally.
So old and obscure. A lot of people haven't seen it, but it just makes me pee my pants because it's so uncomfortable.
It's very funny. Yeah.
Where we knew how toxic Kevin Spacey was. Not to dish, but that's pretty well known.
Yeah,
All right. What do you miss most about acting? An anonymous attendee is here, Brian. That's never happened before.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Asks, what do you miss about acting?
I had a really clean falling out with acting, so I that's kind of hard to answer, but I did love specifically doing like a really funny farce, which I had the opportunity to do some of them, and just that, tweaking and perfecting the comedy technique to really, those nights when you really had the audience in the palm of your hand and you could really get milk a laugh out of just about anything, and sometimes get the, the second or the third laugh with a good take. I really miss doing a good like British farce, but and I love, the process of collaborating with actors and all of that kind of stuff. But I don't miss it. It wasn't for me.
Fantastic. Do you ever watch? Do CDs ever do? Okay, it's asked in the negative. I had to wrap my head around it. Do CDs ever not watch past an actor's slate? Is the question. So, do you ever see a slate and end it there? Are you still? Can you still hear me? Are we still live? What's happening? We're still live. I think Brian got. Oh, are you there?
Sorry, it got all glitchy, so I didn't hear that last question.
Okay. Easily repeated. Do CDs ever not watch past an actor's slate?
No. I mean, here's the thing. My office, I wouldn't know from other offices, but my office, we tend to put the slate last. We often don't watch the slate because it doesn't necessarily pertain for us, but we
Good to know.
watch the rest. Yeah.
But I think you're broadening that question out because I get where it comes from because, I talk to so many actors and teach in different places, et cetera. I get where it comes from. I just think it's what's helpful for actors to understand is that everybody's a professional doing a professional grade job. There's not a universal answer that everybody in a job does things the exact same way, although there is an agreeable shared standard of intent. But most importantly, I don't think, especially when you're working at the union or professional level, I'm not saying this to you, but I'm just saying it to any actors out there, is that there's not like these instant deal breakers or silver bullets. It's all about what we talked about before, training yourself to professional standards and then staying in the game to consistently make offers. And that's really what networking is in this business. Nobody's having a big social, even before COVID, or a big luncheon where we all got together and just schmoozed and had cocktails. And I don't know what that was. That was my space cigarette, I guess.
Schmooze, yeah.
Networking is consistently staying in the game and doing good work. Would you agree, disagree?
I do agree with that. I think, uh, well, it's two things. One, that idea of not watching past the slate doesn't really apply on our side because that would suggest like you see someone's slate and go, oh, they're going to be totally wrong for this. And we already have gone through that by deciding who we're calling in or who we're giving the opportunity to tape, etc. Um, but yeah, I have my own feeling on this. Other people won't share it, but to me, there's such an onus on social media, schmoozing, blah blah blah. I don't really think it works that way. At least not for me. That's inorganic. It is about doing good work, building real relationships with people, and allowing that to take you where it does. But if you can, I had a friend, I'll say Matt Loria, who's a somewhat successful TV actor. He was part of the Friday Night Lights cast and some other shows. Said to me early on, he was like, just don't think of it as schmoozing and think about it as, are you going to make a friend with someone? And as soon as I started doing that and seeing if connections were real with people rather than feeling like, oh my God, I need to get to know this person, it went much better. It's a slower path, but I guess I'm a slow and solid sort of guy. I hate social media. It's just not for me personally, but it's, real relationships and real quality of work. I don't care how many followers you have. If you come into the room and do great work, we're going to call you back for other stuff, whether you get that job or not. And vice versa. You could have millions of followers, and if the work is no good, we have no reason to call you back.
Absolutely. And it's always good to hear and hear reiterated. I do remember, like 8 years ago, there was a hot second where Hollywood wanted it to be true that they could find great talent with huge social medias and flirted with that. And then they've asked YouTube stars to come in an audition and they were either horrible or just not trained.
I mean, here's the thing. Like, you did get an Aquafina that way, right? Or like Megan Amram, who's a successful TV, right? But they just so happened to be really talented. So they proved themselves as talented through social media, but the talent was real. It was there.
They were willing. Some people make more money sitting in their bedroom doing what they're doing on YouTube. And then they saw that, it's like, okay, it's like, $1,300 for a co-star just to start. They were like, I made that in a day on my YouTube channel. So
Right.
that happened. Good for you. Gail Silver, and I think we've cleared out the chat questions. Do you remember the St. Nicholas Theater? She's curious.
I've heard the name. I don't think I was ever there myself, but my parents happen to be in town right now helping with childcare. My dad will undoubtedly remember because he also remembers things like seeing Steppenwolf when it was in the basement of a church in Highland Park. So, lifelong theater lovers. I'm sure he was there.
So exciting. I geeked out like a goober. I've been to Chicago several times, but it wasn't until I was a bit older, and going to the Second City and the Steppenwolf I just lost my mind. I was like a little boy in Disneyland. I was like, oh my God, it's real theater in Chicago. I geeked out hard, Brian.
Yeah, it's the best. Yeah.
I love Chicago a lot. It's been a while since I've been there. Well, you are the best. I think we're concluded. So I'm wrapping, and I really appreciate you being here. Before you go, I have something to give to you, because
Oh,
since
wow.
you're nice enough to join us in real life, there would be a present. I don't know, maybe a copy of the book, something like that. But virtually, what I have is this. Let's see if they're Louise Hay Power Thought cards, or what they are. So what I do at the end for each guest is randomly select one. I'll just shuffle through, and you can say stop. And
Okay.
in my mind, that's whatever's on that card is what the universe wants you to hear today. It may or may not be true, but it's what I've decided.
I love
And
it.
they're
Yeah.
usually fairly positive, so it's a nice way to end. So whenever you're ready, say stop.
Stop.
Okay. It is this card. Let's see what it says for you. I am safe in the universe, and all life loves and supports me. I breathe in the fullness and richness of life. I observe with joy as life abundantly supports me and supplies me with more good than I can imagine. Brian, you've got good mojo around you.
Wow, I will take it. That is much better than the last time I played tarot. That's great.
I'll just read you something that Louise Hay wrote. She's got some gems. All right, everybody. That is our Chattable for today. Brian, Sutow, it was so nice to get to know you. I really appreciate you coming by, and all the care you offer actors, which is very evident in this discussion today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. My pleasure. It was great talking with you.
Okay, we'll see you again. Take care.